So don't worry, I'm going to guide all of this and we're going to have fun. So let's start with the question then. The question today is if, let me just make sure. Yeah, it's a teleportation machine, right? So imagine that your company has a teleportation machine and you're able to, this machine is able to transport, a person from 100 meters. So it's a short distance. And the question is, how would you monetize such a device, right? So it's some of the monetization execution type of question. All right, so let me put it on the board, that question, and then we're going to start talking about what kinds of frameworks we think are good for this, right? So how would you monetize? How to monetize, teleportation machine that transports a person 100 meters distance. All right. So who is the brave soul that would start? Let's start with thinking about what kind of framework would I use. And by framework, I mean, for those of you that is your first time, it means, what is sort of like the strategy that you're going to use in order to, come out to a solution? What is the path that you're going to take? And so let's start with somebody who wants to, give it a shot, just the framework, from beginning to end, how are you going to arrive to the solution? I mean, we can have other people also give their frameworks. We put them on the board.
I was thinking we could use the circles framework.
Is this Kunal?
Yes, that's Kunal speaking.
Yeah, this is not a product design question. This is
okay.
a monetization question. It's an execution question, so that wouldn't work because they're not asking you here how to design.
How to design. Yeah,
right.
You're right.
Anybody? Otherwise, I can put mine and we can start with that.
You could use a framework such as like a game framework, like really talk about sort of maybe ask some questions to clarify kind of what the high level goals are, understand what the goals of this product are. And you could just let them know that you're thinking about some of these things. You could talk about the bigger space. Once you actually sort of establish the goals, you could talk about a bunch of you could basically talk about the different you could brainstorm down a bunch of different metrics. So you could think about the user journey through a product like this, talk about, everything from acquisition all the way to monetization. And then as it's sort of focused on, acquisition all the way through referrals, and as they're sort of focused on monetization, you could focus on some of the key prioritization metrics, you could prioritize some of the key monetization metrics, and sort of focus on, evaluate those key monetization metrics. And I think part of the thing I'm thinking about is trying to get into the user journey, because I think what they're going to want to see here is some sort of understanding of the different opportunities that you have to make money off of this technology. And so you can go over some of that when you're talking about the space. You can go over some of that when you're talking about the drilling down into the specific monetization metrics. And then you could prioritize, I think, the best way to monetize based on maybe whatever sort of clarification metric you've tied into sort of gross revenue or margin, or there's a variety of different ways I guess you could think about it once you got into the exercise. So it's sort of like that kind of a typical sort of like game framework, goals, user actions, metrics, evaluate.
Yeah. So, I'm going to give my opinion. Maybe somebody else can give their opinion. I think that I definitely clarifying, it makes sense. But then I'm going to ask you, Jonathan, a few questions with this, right? So you're saying that you're going to define metrics. So what does monetization means? How you're going to make money out of this product, right? So how is the metrics tied to making money?
I think there's a variety of ways that you could think about monetizing this. And I think some of that you'd probably want to talk about when you're first clarifying the issue and talking about the space, whether or not this is this a B2B product where you're going to basically make money off of other businesses? Is this going to be a B2C product where you're actually going to monetize the end consumer, and what that would sort of look like? I think there's a variety of different ways that you would think about to monetize a product like this at the highest level.
I understand, but my question is, why do you want to define metrics? So that would be my question. Why do you want to define metrics? What are metrics for you? Give me the definition of metrics.
Metrics for me would be things like percent. If this was like a B2C sort of application or product, like metrics would be total number of paying users, revenue per user, the cost of what each teleportation is, how much you charge for. It's kind of all the specific metrics that you might want to be looking at. For example, if you were trying to operate this as a live application and you were sort of like the product manager for it, trying to understand sort of the your monetization your monetization metrics, I would probably want to explore a bunch of those different specific metrics, and then maybe think about prioritizing which ones are most relevant based on the space that we had actually decided to focus on.
I personally,
does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you that you need to explore the space, and definitely going into the opportunities makes sense to me, right? In terms of metrics, that can take you into a rabbit hole. Like it can sidetrack you, because if you are identifying metrics, right? The question is, how are you going to make money of this, right? And a monetization metric would be revenue, right? But that is not the question, right? To define monetization metrics, usually metrics would be defined to see how your product is doing, right? It could be on the revenue side, it could be also on the engagement side, retention, or whatever. But that's not going to help me come up with a model on how to make money, right? I haven't created the product yet, right? So I don't know how I can measure that, right? So the monetization question is way before you have a product out there, right? So I think that metrics would be the wrong way to go, because you will be forced to design the product. That is not what they're asking. I think that at the core of the question is, how do you make money, right? And you mentioned, hey, let's clarify, let's look at, what's the goal of the product, that's fine, what's the intention of this product, right? And then you said something good, which is like, okay, let's look at opportunities, right? So when looking at opportunities, I think what you're thinking about is like, hey, what kind of problems can I solve with this, right? In the B2C space and the B2B space. What are the types of problems I can solve with this? And the most important question, are people or industries or businesses going to pay for this? Are they willing to pay for this, right? And then how are you going to know whether they're willing to pay for this? Where are there alternatives? Are they using something today to solve that problem, right? It could be that there's nothing that solves that problem, or it could be that there are alternatives that solves that problem. Perhaps not fully, but somehow, right? So they're going to be comparing with that, right? In general, businesses. Why am I going to pay for your solution if there's something else that's cheaper? You either have to give me something that is extremely far more valuable to me, which means maybe you're saving me costs in my business if it's a B2B, or for a consumer, yeah, maybe you're saving me costs or you're making my life so much easier, right? And what does that mean to me? What's the value I'm going to put to it, right? So I think that that's at the core of monetization, right? As well as you have to think about, well, what is this going to cost me to make, right? I cannot make less than my cost unless I want to kill any competition, but eventually I'm going to increase the price, right? But I need to know how much it's going to cost me to make this a little bit, right? So I think that this definitely I would do this looking for opportunities. I would do definitely. Metrics I wouldn't do again because you don't have the product yet. But then here now you have to like prioritize your opportunities. Maybe now you compare with alternatives. Once you compare with alternatives, you see the pros and cons for the user. Now you can start thinking about, what's going to be your revenue model, plus maybe price. And at the end, this is the core, the core of this question. What's your revenue model and what's the price? But I would love to hear from other people. Maybe they have, other ways to get to the answer.
So I was thinking we could either use the RISE scoring framework or the impact mapping prioritization framework.
For what?
For figuring out, well, since you mentioned that we haven't figured out what the project is, how we're going to develop the product, we should, if we're using the impact mapping framework, then we look outward from high-level strategic goals, determining who the users themselves are and how each actor can contribute to the goal. So let's say we have businesses identified. Where do we fit in? Where we're offering them a value proposition which they are not finding with other businesses at a point where they're willing to spend money for it. So that could be the impact mapping prioritization framework. Or if we use the RISE scoring method, then we would rate them on the basis of reach, impact, confidence, and effort, each feature that we could develop for this particular product. And depending on that score, we could decide which features out of this to prioritize.
Yeah, so this is not this framework, RISE and other ones are prioritization frameworks, right? Where it is a situation where you already have a solution and you have a solution and you need to prioritize which solution, right? Or maybe you have a bunch of problems that you're going to solve and you're going to define which problem makes sense for you to solve, right? But that's not the question, right? I mean, you can
Fair enough. That
can
makes sense. No, that totally makes sense.
When you have options, right? But anybody else here that is a little bit more pricey?
I was thinking maybe we could use something like the STP framework. Like we could probably start off by talking a little about, jobs to be done and talk about STP, which is like segmentation, targeting, positioning. And then we can go to something like a value-based pricing for the segment that we identify and based on how we are positioning the product to that segment.
Segmentation, targeting, and position.
So I don't know, Melina. It's you have a great framework as is, and I don't see this question as much as eventual execution, how we monetize. Somehow I'm looking at this question as a creativity exercise for a PM, trying to sense, can they, basically I would spend probably half that interview on the clarify question, right? Trying to see what is the cost per transport? Is it transporting a person or transporting goods, right? What's the maximum weight that it can transport?
Those are clarification questions.
Right,
Definitely.
Yeah. So and based on that, there could be creative ways of how this could be used, right? Versus once a use case is chosen, then you can sort of calculate, lifetime value and whatever costs and things like that.
Yeah, I agree with you, right? So I'm just gonna give you what came to mind to me, okay, today. And then we'll have somebody, is this, who just spoke?
This was Arsen, Melina.
Hey, Arsen. So let me just put, we have one framework, we have another framework. I'm gonna put mine, and then how about you, Arsen? Want to give you a shot to answer? Okay.
A shell to answer?
Yeah, you want to try it? So I'm gonna put the way that I think how I would do it, but there are multiple ways, right? And maybe also the person that talked about this could also, do it. So from my perspective, the way I would do it is I would think, first of all, clarify. And, as Arsen said just now, I would ask a lot of questions, transport. Okay, can I transport something else besides a person? How much does it cost? What other things did I ask? What do we need what do we mean exactly by the teleportation? That would be my first question. Then what is the cost to build this? Then how long does it take to transport anything? Because it can take an hour or 1 second, I don't know. And that can make a difference. And also, can I transport, besides a person, can I transport things? So those would be clarifying questions just right off the bat. And why am I asking this? Cost, obviously, right? I need to know what's the bottom line. How long does it take to transport? Because, if it takes 2 hours or something, an alternative that takes less, well, you cannot compete, right? Can I transport things? Why am I asking this? Well, because if I can transport things, well, I can use it besides, committing people in other kinds of applications. All right, so after that, what I would do is to say, okay, I asked my qualifying questions. Now I want to think out loud, what are the scenarios in which I'm going to use this transport? Because really, this scenario is a short transport, it's 100 meters, right? So what are the scenarios or situations in which this short transport may be needed, right? So that's what I would think, scenarios / applications. And just look at the gamma of things. Then I would look at, okay, so now I have all these applications, all these scenarios. Now I'm going to prioritize which scenario or application is most important. Most important, based on some criteria, right? So I'm going to use some criteria, and I could use the RISE criteria that somebody mentioned, or I can do something else. But you need to have some criteria and you need to defend it. The other thing I'm going to use is like, okay, let's say I prioritize here the application using a criteria. What are alternative solutions that exist today? And I'm going to analyze what exists and how much it costs and how much people are, paying for it and stuff like that. And then probably I'm going to talk about the trade-offs between some of these solutions and this transporting thing, teleportation. And then finally, now I have a picture of what are current alternatives to this solution of transportation. And now I can think about a monetization model. And that means, what's my revenue model? And what is the price I'm going to put to it? Because based on what exists, people are less or more willing to pay for my new stuff, depending on, how much better it is. So that's what I would use. So
when you mentioned earlier that when someone suggested using the circles method, and you're like, well, it's really more of a estimation sort of question. The framework that you've chosen is really more of mostly a design, right? Mostly a design question where you're basically sort of going through similar sort of steps as you would, maybe even slightly different stamp, but you're going through similar steps that you would in a product design exercise, and just really coming into more of the metrics-based solution at the bottom, right?
It's much more high level, right? Usually in a product design question, in a product design question, you have to talk about, okay, so who are the users, right? And then you have to talk about what is their, pain points, and,
Sure.
the use cases, right, and pain points. And here, then you have to talk about, you prioritize this, of course.
Solutions.
Then talk about your solutions, right? And then talk about, priority.
Trade-off.
And then you talk about metrics. Here you talk about trade-off, of course. And then you summarize, right? So I see what you're saying, but I'm not gonna go here into what are pain points, right? Very detailed, and I'm not going to give you a wireframe, right? Usually here you have to give a wireframe, especially for Facebook, right? These are very deep, empathetic type of solution. Whereas here, I'm gonna say just to give you an example, okay? So here it's like, okay, scenarios. Okay, this is a short run for 100 meters. Where do we need to transport people 100 meters? Well, first thing is elevators, right? You have to go up. Okay, so elevators. What else is there? Maybe for industrial needs. Maybe you need to go down the earth 100 meters. It's very hard. Maybe you need it for a warehouse. Okay, so people moving stuff from one place to the other, or maybe you need it for shipping and receiving. So what I'm going through my mind is thinking about consumer type of scenarios and business type of scenarios where I'm picking short distances solutions, right? But I'm not talking here. I'm already deciding what the pain point is. The pain point we already decided, right? The pain point is really moving somebody from here to there, right? 100 meters. And I'm looking at what are solutions today to that pain point, right? And once I go through these solutions that exist, I'm like, well, which of these solutions actually is the most needed, right? What is the scenario that is most needed that people or industries are willing to pay more? So in essence, I'm looking at, we already know what the pain point is, so to speak. We're picking the scenario that is used the most, so we think people are going to pay the most. And then I'm mostly on the solution space, practically, right? I'm not designing anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But it's similar, but at a high level stuff. All right, somebody wants to give it a shot? And you can use whatever framework you want to use.
I can try.
Sure.
All right. Can I ask some clarifying questions at first?
Yes.
So in this case, it says that it's a teleportation machine. Can I assume that is just basically moving an object or an animated person, a person from a point A to point B as a whole?
Yes, you can assume that it's just for people.
Okay, so only for people, not animals, not inanimate objects like pieces of metal or anything of that sort.
That's a good question. I think that you can assume, yeah, let's keep it in the people space.
Okay, people space, very well. Are there size limitations, like maybe heavy people cannot go, it maybe can go up to, let's say, I don't know, 200 pounds or whatever? Are there size limitations?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I would imagine, our company wants to, we want to develop something that is, portable. So I would say maximum of like 8 people.
Now, okay, 8 people. 8 people. So basically, it can transport more up to 8 people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of like an elevator. Think about it that way, right? Sort of okay.
Yeah.
And then each person, it doesn't really matter as much like how heavy they are. That person is 200 pounds or 500 pounds, right?
Right. It doesn't matter.
Okay. So, and then the other part of the question: how fast is the transport from point A to point B?
It's 1 second.
1 second. Okay. Is it 1 second or is it instantaneous, like, I don't know, speed of light or whatever?
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Okay.
1 second is kind of long if you think about it, right?
Okay.
Let's make it really short. Let's make it, 100 milliseconds.
Okay, 100 milliseconds. Okay. How big is the machine itself? How heavy is it? And like size-wise as well.
Yeah, good point. As many as 8 people that you can fit.
Okay, very good. Size of an elevator. What's the speed of manufacture for us? How many of these machines can we like scale up and produce? For
Yeah, think about it's like infinite. You have no problems with that.
Okay, very well. Is it possible that if we put extra investment into engineering work, can we increase the distance, and sort of do we have a probability of achieving that in the near term?
For now, let's just think it's only 100 meters.
Okay.
Let's see, somebody has some more questions here. No match to emission, not sure. Is it deployed on a specific spot? That's a good point. No, it's portable.
Portable. Okay,
Yeah.
portable. Any side effects?
Good question. No side effects.
Okay, so it's completely safe.
You don't lose any DNA.
Okay. Any other caveats that we should know of before we proceed further?
Just that the cost is very small to your company, almost negligible.
Cost is basically nearing zero. Okay.
Yeah.
That is actually a great idea, great thing. Okay, very well. What are can we think of? And I think that may be a question for everyone. Is what are the most expensive things that we have right now in transportation? Where, if you think of transportation space or moving an object or like actually a person to a certain distance, which areas are the people currently paying the biggest buck?
Yeah, 1 second. There's another question here, so maybe we should answer this. Can I transport people with their belongings? Yes, as long as a handbag or something like that. Yeah, definitely. Maybe even, a suitcase or whatever.
That changes it. Okay, so I thought we're sticking with people, but then it means some objects. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. But we want to keep it for people.
Okay, very well. All right, good question, good point.
Add multiple together to extend distance. Yeah.
So meaning that the person will be transported in their clothes as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, very well.
Some person asks, can you add multiple together to extend distance? I see multiple of these machines. No, let's just stick it to one.
I think longer distances, maybe you could, if we have that limitation, you could basically do pairings of machines, and you basically teleport, you exit one machine, you enter another, you teleport another 100 feet. You could achieve the longer distances that way.
That's smart. That's very smart, actually. Well, let's keep it to one. Okay.
Okay.
Just one machine at a time.
Okay, very well. Okay, just one machine. So I think that's going to be an open question because I'm struggling at the moment. What are the most, and I think our objective is to make money, right? It's not, because if the cost is negligible, it could be that we just want to make the world a better place or anything of that sort.
Sure. No, it's to make money.
Okay. So what are the most expensive, basically, alternatives? Currently, people use all kinds of transportation for short distances. Where do people pay the most money for that?
So you're asking me, or you're thinking out loud?
I'm thinking out loud, and I think I'm asking everyone here. I think like the most common use case is really an elevator, right? So if the cost, basically you're saying, is negligible, that's pretty much will just kill the elevator market across the world up to 100 feet for buildings up to 100 meters high, right? We can just take over that market right away. There's no competition. And actually, elevators are very expensive. It's very expensive to install it, very expensive to operate. And in this case, the only point here is that elevator can stop on different floors. Here, this machine cannot, right? So it's only point A to point B, and we're not doing pairings. So in this case, I'm thinking like, where would the people like move where it's like you're transporting, I don't know, into a super secret bunker, for example. Maybe that's a use case. There's a super secret bunker. It has no entrance, but you can teleport into it, right? That's a use case that people will pay money for, but it's an extremely rare use case. If we're thinking mass,
So
I can think of use case, yeah.
Be a little bit more strategic with your thinking of different uses, right?
Yeah.
So let's go through the consumer space first. Then we go to something else. So you mentioned elevators, people in general. Okay, so and think of short distances, right? So you say elevators, and you brought out a very good point. That may not be a good idea because it's a fixed point, 100 meters, and people want to go in between. Okay, that's one. Now you're saying other situations where people want to be transported in 100 meters. Now you're bringing this super bunker thing, which seems like a very unusual situation, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know the reach of that in terms of the people that will use it would be not very big, right? Think about other situation where people have to walk 100 meters at a time or whatever. They don't want to do that. Where could that be?
Could be like underground, like subway type situation.
Mm-hmm. Subway, yeah.
Like you want to go underground, and for example, you're crossing the street, right? Instead of digging a tunnel underground.
Okay. So, but do they exist? Is that true today?
Yeah,
I mean,
I've
been to Korea.
Yeah, some cities have this situation where the streets are very crowded and quite far apart.
And you probably, like even here in San Francisco, right? You can go to one BART station and maybe 100 meters away is the other one, or you want to go far. So, okay, that's one situation, basically public transportation, right?
And then somebody mentioned the use case crossing the street, and that's another great point, is that in many cases there is a cost. The alternative really is either slowing the traffic and building the traffic lights, or building an overpass or underpass. In this case, in putting teleport strategically, the city can basically increase the traffic flow, so therefore make more money that way, reduce congestion, but also actually not spend money on overpasses or underpasses, reduce accidents. So that's a kind of a significant use case. And usually a street is not going to be longer, not going to be wider than 100 meters.
Let's make a list of all these solutions. We're going to put them on here, okay?
Okay, so I'm going to say cross.
Elevators. So we have elevators. Okay, we have subways. We have crossing the street. Somebody brought up ski resorts. Great idea.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what else?
I think one solution can be like used in the warehouse, where we need to move people from A point to B point in terms of scanning the product or collecting some products from the shelf. So that can be used.
So this is
so I actually deal with like logistics and warehouse space. So because basically you're saying a person needs to go and pick an item and put it in a box, and then they do multiple picks usually. There's no single place in a warehouse that you want to have the transport points between. It's multiple places, so then you're either installing it all over, or you're just not achieving that goal, unless you're thinking just entering the warehouse.
okay.
What about, I can think about the form factors a little bit different, but boarding a plane and deplaning, boarding airlines and deplaning airlines.
Okay, how about the if it's portable machine, that there could be use case, could be outdoors, right? It could be hiking, climbing a mountain, right? Well, actually, no. Well, yeah, the lead person would install the teleport. Then basically, the rest of the group would transport. Then the lead person, another person carries the other part of the teleport further up, and then you transport. It could be something like that, getting to high peaks, but for people with, like less strong bodies, let's put it that way, in a less good shape.
Let's put another one here, which is spaces like Disney. What do you call those? Entertainment.
Amusement parks.
Amusement parks itself.
And where would they use it in there, Milena?
Well,
in
you know, if you've been to Disney, like in Florida, I'm sure Disney is it's huge, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you're tired, you just want to like go get there, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it could be used.
How about
Yeah.
in hospitals for transporting like patients or doctors?
What was that?
Hospital. I think somebody was saying hospital.
Hospital.
Yeah, I meant
What would
hospitals.
be the scenario for hospitals?
For like in hospitals, things are time bound, right? And there could be emergency, so they have to transport patients, and even doctors might have to travel from point A to point B.
Hospitals to transport patients. Okay. Okay, so we have a lot of stuff here, right?
Yeah.
All right, so now we need to like quickly decide, you know, what's gonna give us the most money, right? We have to have some criteria. How we're gonna decide. So what is the criteria that you wanna use?
So I think one of the most important criterias would be number one. It's scale. It's how many people would use that, or how many places this can be used at per each of these areas, right? That's number one. And number two is how critical it is to actually, if in those areas, to have a machine like this versus use an existing method of transportation. And then also, what are people willing to pay for, right? Who's paying for this, and what are they willing to pay for this alternative?
What was the second one?
Sorry?
You said number of people using it. The second one is what?
I think basically how like is there a pain point with that method of transport for people? How much are they willing to go toward something else versus they're just happy with, yeah, okay, it's a method of transportation, but they're happy and they're not really willing to switch? Is their pain point was the current method of transportation?
Yeah, I would put here what's the level of pain point.
Yeah, level of pain, yeah.
And we're gonna go to alternatives later, but what's the level of pain point? What else?
And then how much money would they be willing to pay for, or would they be willing to pay for, and how much money would they be willing to pay for this faster alternative?
Okay.
Like willingness to spend. Yeah.
Right. How much would they be willing to pay? Yeah. Willingness to pay. How much?
Milena, I don't know if you have it, but is there an alternative in the first place, right?
What do you mean? Oh,
For example, like
in the first place.
yeah, for example, like some places you may not even have ability to transport things or transport people.
No alternative, right?
Yeah.
No alternative.
Can you think of any places like that?
Yeah, if you, let's say you're starting a new ski resort, you don't have to build one, right?
No, but I think what he means is
there's no current transportation available.
Nothing exists.
Right.
But that's unlikely, right? You can always transport something, except like
maybe some.
There's always an alternative, but we'll
Okay.
I want to leave it here because it's something we need to think about. Somebody also put frequency. Makes total sense.
Yep, frequency of use. That's right.
That happening, which is just something that I always use. All right, so let's go through this. And you know, when I do this, I always try to prioritize the criteria that makes the most sense, like what makes the person or the business desperate to have a solution. And I think that, and I weigh them. I put a weight to that, because if you're going to start high, low, medium, whatever, that you're never going to end the question, right? You need to put some weight to something. So the criteria that I would select would be, first of all, you know, the level of pain point is really important. You know, is this really huge? And then the frequency, to me, are like the most important things.
Other one is speed, probably, right? You said 1 second.
Hmm?
Other one is speed, wherever the speed is more important, like time or speed.
I think that's tied to the level of pinpoint. So
Okay.
that is part of the characteristics of the solution. But it's the level of pinpoint. If I really need something really fast, right? Or if I can live with something that it's slower, I think I would put it with that. So if we go by these two first, right? Level of pain point and frequency, right? This one is also, of course, important, right? The business, the size, but I think frequency will take care of that. So crossing the street, right?
Malena, are you showing something? I'm not seeing a screen. Maybe it's just me.
Sorry, which part, Arsen?
I'm not seeing you, like your board, basically. Are you?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Click on her name.
Can somebody see me?
Yes.
Yes.
We can see you.
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, let me. Okay, how about now, Arsen? You need to. I think on your screen there is a pin that you can pin me, or if you see.
Oh yeah. I pinned you right away. It's just now I only see a picture, not a.
That's pretty strange.
Maybe it's just me. Yeah.
Maybe bandwidth issue.
Anybody else has that issue?
Okay. Oh, okay.
No,
That's fine.
All right. Well, sorry, Arsen. We'll continue.
No worries.
We're recording this, so you can always see it.
Thank you.
Anyway, so let's start with the level of pain point. What is like really critical? And that level of pain point, somebody said alternative, right? Like if that level of pain point is not so much and you have an alternative, unlikely you are going to need something like this, right? Because, the user's going to pay, you have to pay something for this, right? So crossing the street, is that a high pain point? Probably for somebody that's, has a disability, it is, right? But that's probably the minority. And I think that people are doing well as it is. What are your opinions?
I think crossing the street can be a pain point for people who live in highly populous regions. Like if you're comparing Beijing and if you're comparing Vancouver, the population density is very different. So it depends on where you're actually trying to do the first implementation case.
So also crossing the street has actually multiple personas behind this. One is obviously we're thinking from the first person, right? And actually like a person like one of us. But if we think about the city or business or congestions or other things, in fact, every street crossing introduces a level of congestion, introduces level of traffic lights, other things that you need to do, versus if you didn't have that, you just had streets where the cars go and nothing crosses. Your business would increase, profits would increase, and at the same time people would feel just safe just teleporting across the street. So in this case the user is the government, right, or the city.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to think who's going to pay for this, right? Which is the government. And they probably have limited funds, as usual.
Yeah, they probably won't change any existing things unless like high value crossings or very big cities like San Francisco, super congested stuff. But otherwise, any new city that's being built, they'd probably consider, because it's a negligible cost to us, and for them to introduce a crossing, it is probably cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars or something, or maybe I think maybe tens of thousands. It's a lot to maintain it and all of this, versus our machine is just boom, you put it in. Yeah.
So let's put in there a place for crowded cities, and maybe they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So ski resorts, level of pain point.
First of all, it's seasonal, right?
Yeah. Right. Frequency low, right? So I would say, right off the bat, I think it's low frequency. It's for rich people. Yeah, they're willing to pay, but it's low frequency and it's seasonal.
And it's part of the experience, sort of this. You get this lift and it's dragging you up and things like that.
Yeah. All right. So let's go warehouses. What about this? For Amazon, for example, for huge companies like that, do you think it's useful? They would pay for this as opposed to taking. I'm sure they have the golf cart inside.
The high-end warehouses potentially with high volume,
Well,
basically high frequency and high volume.
so I will disagree with that point. I actually deal with logistic distribution a lot. Warehouse is incredibly large, has incredibly large square footage. There are old type and new type. Old type, which is non-Amazon, which is you have goods all over and you have people running all over the floor picking goods from shelves that go high and they go wide and far. So there is not like a point A and point B you can transport. You actually need to pick a box full of goods that may be in all over different places. So there is no point A or B. Versus Amazon actually has then robots that have a certain way of their code things and mix things. If anyone ever hasn't done an Amazon warehouse tour, I recommend. And they actually have the robots running stuff. So I don't see the use case there. It has to be fixed point A to B.
So better, right? Yeah. And especially cost of labor, they probably don't want to pay people. So right off the bat, I think not on this one. Okay, how about boarding airlines?
When I mentioned this, I was actually thinking about the ability of machine modified to kind of actually get people in seats as opposed to just a block of people. Because what I was then I think you're talking about decreasing boarding and deplaning times massively, right? More increased flights per day per airline, more people flying, more people traveling, etc.
Yeah. So it has to be very precise, though, right? In the seat.
That's
we
right.
haven't said anything about the precision, but I think that would be a fantastic solution, right? So I think this is a possibility. I will put this as number one because that is the holy grail, right, of airline making more money, I think.
See, but the limitation that was stated initially, it's up to 8 people, and it's a coupling, right, which is the transporter and the receiver machine. And in this case, the receiver machine, if it takes up to 8 people, and if they are even strategically positioned, it will only put people into exactly 8 seats, and then you need to have a second machine that's covering another 8 seats, right?
I guess
we didn't say anything about the receiver machine. It's just you transport the person 100 meters at an exact location.
Or I guess really? Even think about exactly. Or what I was thinking was if the receiver was somehow I was just thinking 8 people at a time, just each group of 8 seats receives 8 people, and it's just boom, 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 boom. Or I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, so okay, so that I think, because anything in science fiction, there is always the transponder and the receiver. There's always an entry gate and then the exit gate, right? Because they couple and then they basically digitize you and then transport you and then reassemble you. So in this case, if it's just beaming you without actually the receiver there, so in this case, there is an elevator use case then, because I could be beaming people up to 100 meters. Could be beaming them to 2nd floor, 3rd floor, and so on.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so it could be so. Let's choose the ones. Okay, so this could be one, and this could be another one. We're going to prioritize in a minute, right? But I'm just picking the ones that look good.
Okay.
Elevator, boarding airlines. Disney amusement park. That seems like only for specific places, right?
Yeah, Disney is a huge point, especially if people are with kids there. Everybody is exhausted and tired. Children don't want to walk. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so it could be this one. Okay, it could be this one too. Although it's it's only one thing.
Yeah, it's a limited customer base.
Disney are there in the world, right?
Yeah, not a lot.
No, but it can be any theme park, right? And also there's no price elasticity there.
And it could be conferences, it could be anything, right? So, and you need portable things, because this is a portable thing. So yeah, let's put this aside, because there are more uses, right? Theme parks, conferences, huge places. Subways. Somebody said something about subways. How about this one? This seems like crossing streets also, right? Or crowded cities,
Yeah, it looks similar.
right? What are people's opinions on the subways?
You don't have a lot of them. I mean, only major cities have subways, and even then, not as extensive, probably.
So maybe it's unusual. Okay. Hospitals.
Hospitals are the places that charge a lot of money and have the money to pay, right? And so if it results in speed of transporting doctors to the patient or nurses to the patient, they probably pay, right? And they charge us for this, but they will pay good money for it.
Okay, so now let's think about the trade-offs between all of this, right? We have elevator. I'm just gonna put the ones that we chose. Elevators, boarding airlines, we have theme parks or conferences. We have, and then hospitals. Okay, who
And the crossing the street, I think, was there too.
is critically? Crossing the street?
Yep.
For crowded cities. And who's going to, let's now think who's going to pay for this, right? Because, yeah, you need the machine and you need to maintain it. And I'm thinking that the company is going to charge, let's think of elevators, right? Elevators. There are buildings already, existing buildings, right? And you're going to propose this thing to buildings to use instead of the elevators that already exist in the building, right? Would they be willing to pay for this if they already have elevators? My guess is not.
I don't think so.
No. Yep.
Yeah, you need a greenfield opportunity there.
Right.
Well, I think it depends. It depends on the fact that you could keep so an elevator has several items to it, which has the box that moves, and then it has a shaft. So in this case, this machine doesn't actually need a shaft. It could be installed, basically just boxes can be installed at a floor, or maybe even we could teleport people right outside an elevator where they don't need to actually open the door. They don't need to use the shaft. So in this case, it could only be sort of first, like you come in and then you get teleported. Potentially the retrofit sort of cost could be small, but the benefits could be huge, because I think we can sort of monetize it in a way if we calculate the cost to keep the elevator up, because it needs to be inspected frequently. There is all kinds of things that go into it, and it breaks and so on. So there's sort of a cost benefit analysis there. Yeah.
Okay, so let's put cost, or let's put pros and cons. Okay, pro and con, maybe of replacing the elevator, right?
Yeah.
Pro and con for the user.
And what will happen is also it'll be like a snowball effect. Once you have a few. Oh, sorry, good. Yes, sir.
Excuse me. The pros that you're saying is maintenance cost, right? No maintenance cost, right?
That's right. Well, if I assume there is no maintenance cost here, or very low.
No, but we want money, right? So we're going to charge you for something, right? What are cons? What are cons? Cons is that you need to put this box somewhere, right? People have to go there, right? To go into the building or whatever, right? So it's sort of like a bottleneck already, right? You will need to buy many of these. So it takes space, right? It takes additional space. That's what I would put here. And it could be a bottleneck.
And I wonder, is it a box in fact, or is it sort of like a pad they walk onto and they get sort of teleported to the right floor? So,
yeah, that's true, but still you need space, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Okay, boarding airlines. What's the pro? The pro is that, wow, you can like minimize boarding time, right? And that means dollars.
And save on labor, all those sort of machines that bring the letter up, and all those things need to be operated, so it's saving a lot of money on labor and machines.
I don't know so much labor. Why labor?
So there is actually so that gate at the airport, there's actually a person that goes there and sort of uses like a joystick sort of to operate it and get it closer. The plane needs to come close, all those things. Yeah.
Saves labor. Okay. Now, what's the con of doing this? What's the con of doing this?
Yeah, I think space is required to install this machine again on the airline. Yeah.
But that's okay, There's also, space.
Might complicate carry-on luggage.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. So, and another point is that that is not the only bottleneck in the airport. There's also airports have the certain throughput that they can dispatch the plane with, right? Say airports with good equipment can probably have a plane depart or land every minute, some of them every several minutes. There's just that much space they require between each plane departure and landing because of equipment, and you need to monitor all of this traffic and things like that. So even if we get people there in record time into the plane,
it
may not necessarily translate into that plane departing, sooner, leaving the airport.
Got it. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's keep that in mind. Theme parks and conferences. What's the pro? The pro is that you don't need to maybe transport people with a car. Maybe you don't need to buy cars anymore to transport people in the Disney thing. For conferences, you also need to transport. So maybe this translates into the pro is happier customers, and less cost in transport. The con of this is, it takes space. Maybe it's a bottleneck. Although you will need to have multiple things of this, right?
Yeah.
Hospitals, what's the pro?
So hospital, if you can basically articulate this in the amount of time saved for doctors, which are charge hourly, right? There's an hourly rate that a doctor makes or a nurse. If you can translate that into their savings, let's say out of every hour we save you, maybe 5 minutes or whatever number of minutes, and you annualize it, that's pretty much how much money we save them. So
that's more important than that is number of lives saved.
Yeah, that is also true.
That will be true. Yeah.
So saved, and then the con of this again is space. Take space.
Yeah, but hospitals have tons of equipment, so I don't think they'd ever even think of space. And especially you mentioned it's a portable machine, but again, how portable is portable?
Okay, so, crossing the streets. The pro is as you said, more fluid traffic, perhaps of people, more fluid people traffic, and that translates in perhaps more dollars, right, for businesses.
Yeah.
And the con is that it takes space, right? Now let's look at alternatives, right? All right. So of all these elevators, they have alternatives, right? I mean, the elevators themselves in the buildings, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Boarding airlines, they don't have alternatives. To me, this is a high thing because it's so in demand. So I would consider this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Theme parks and conferences, yes, they need it. They have space. Hospitals, they save lives.
Yes.
Crossing streets. Yeah, well, you know what? Businesses are businesses. Why is the government going to pay for this? So I think I will go with these two: boarding and hospitals. Hospitals because it's nice, boarding because the airline business is huge, right? It's trillion, and they have trying to solve this problem. Yeah. Okay. So let's say, how do we put one or the other?
So one question is this: some of these use cases are um, somewhat closely related, right? They can be, I think, potentially grouped. So because like ski resort is very different from elevator, right? It's just kind of just feels different. But a hospital, potentially it's some sort of like an elevator thing. Maybe they move up or down, vertical or horizontally. But so it's kind of close to elevator. So maybe we can also group and say, well, instead of focusing on one, it looks like if we focus on a group, which is vertical or horizontal transportation.
No, because you cannot do that, because what matters is who's going to pay for it and the need of that solution.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Milana. Yeah.
So anyways, boarding airlines and hospitals, right? And I think both of them, I would claim that I would try first hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
There's a need to save lives, so that probably this will be great for them, and maybe we expand into boarding airlines. So, having said that, then how much should we charge the hospital, right? Somebody mentioned, well, what is the cost that it saves to them, right? So I would say, what's the saved cost for the hospital, right? Is time, and maybe we can convert into dollars over time, right? Plus, how do you put number of dollars in lives? Right?
I think there is a way. Is that probably what happens is hospitals have like a safety or like accident rate, and then what we need to understand is that would those accidents could they have been prevented if the doctor was able to get there faster, or if the patient was able to be teleported faster to the doctor to operating room? Because not all accidents are caused by that. Some are like wrong medicine, whatever other things are just unfortunate. So if we understand that piece, then we can say how much, by what factor can we increase the safety of a hospital? That's number one, their reputation, have more business, and number two, that will probably translate into savings for their insurance, and hospital pays tons of money for malpractice insurance and whatever. So in this case, we could actually translate into like huge savings for them in terms of what they pay for insurance. That would be huge bucks, right?
So I'm gonna put here insurance and time for the doctors, okay? In terms of the money saved by hospitals. And why are we doing this? Because now this is if I come with my solution and say, hey, this is how much we're gonna save, and I'm gonna give you the price at that point, actually lower than that, right? To convince them.
One thing I would mention with hospitals is just when you look at the total number of, if we're talking about lives saved, for example, the total amount of patients that die in a hospital as a result of the physician not being 100 yards away is probably very small. I can't imagine that the majority of patients lost in hospitals are because the doctor was 100 yards away and couldn't get there.
Right. So that's a caveat, right?
So I think what you're saying, not specifically in a case per se, but if you translate the speed of movement, you multiply that over time by the number of patients, how doctors get to patients, and how patients, like especially in critical condition, get to doctors, then you would see actually a correlation between the time. Because if a doctor has to spend every, let's say, 10% or 20% of their time walking and getting to patients, imagine how much more patients he could attend to had he not been forced to actually walk a lot, right?
Yeah. That would be a study, but my gut sense tells me that lives would be safe. But granted, the caveat, it's a good one, right? We need to know the numbers of lives saved due to the shortage of time. But that's how I would go about it. Now, specific numbers for this, and then how am I going to price it? Well, I'm actually going to price it probably at half of this to incentivize that they buy my product. And actually, I'm gonna rent it instead of selling it, because there are updates and things like that that need to be done to the machine. But I would probably charge like half this per year, right, to incentivize. Any other ways of pricing it? So, okay, cool. How do you guys feel about this solution? Any improvements we should make to the format, the process?
So one thing I wanted to say about, we were talking about like adoption rates specifically related to some of the use cases. Like, again, I go to elevators, right? Is that, and then that kind of relates to your monetization model, Milena. If we are going, let's say subscription, maybe per use or per person transported or per transport or whatever, and because the cost of manufacture is negligible to us, in fact, that could really increase the adoption rate. If we say, well, you can take our machine for free, right? You can install it, and then just pay us the, whatever, maybe monthly fee plus per transport fee. So in that case, probably a lot more, buildings for elevators or cities for across the street or whatever would actually take us on that, and then we would have enormous adoption that will accelerate right away, right?
So the free machine, you have a monthly subscription plus something else?
Transportation fee.
Per transport fee. So like per use, let's say maybe per person or per use, like you have.
Oh, that's really smart, because now it scales with the number of users. So your revenue scales with the number of users. That's awesome. I think I like that idea better.
And to to the personas that are considering this machine versus an alternative, it's like, well, this is in fact like a zero startup cost, unless you think about placing it or anything. You're not buying it really, you're just getting it, and you don't need to pay almost anything. But if a person uses it, they pay for it, and so they can charge that person, right? And then it's like win-win.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's a great solution, actually. I love it. Any other
just a high level question. So if to take a step back for this particular exercise, we spent probably 95% of the time drilling down into the use case that made the most sense. And very like just a few minutes at the end on sort of like the monetization model around that use case. In an interview situation in an hour, and I think that's appropriate in this forum, there's a lot of people, a lot of discussion, but in an interview scenario, in a 45-minute interview, how would you rebalance that if you were walking through this exercise?
Great question, right? I think that we spent too much time here in trying to prioritize this quickly. I think we should have gone there faster, right? Maybe I just put these things and I put the criteria, real quickly, and I say, this is my priority criteria, and I just go and discard. I put the excess fast, and then I quickly, compare the ones that are left, much faster than what we did here. We went into pros and cons here in quite detail, right? Is there a way to do it faster than that?
Yeah, I mean, I typically would just do a quick prioritization matrix, like size of the market, impact, risk or difficulty, and just kind of talk through it maybe in a minute or two.
Probably that's better, right? I was going there in quite detail here, and maybe it's better to do what you said here, which is like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go with size of market, frequency, right? How big the pain point is,
severity, etc.
And just maybe pick one or two. Like here, for example, I should have reduced this to maybe just 2 options, okay, and do the pro and con. So I think the takeaway is like, if you're going to talk about pro and cons, pick only 2, right? Or 3. Make sure that this is very small, right? And the reason why I talk about pros and cons, because what they're looking for in these interviews is to see whether you can justify your decisions, right? And yeah, you know, you can prioritize here, but you know, I want to make sure that I just don't say, you know, I'm going to pick this because of blah, and not give a good justification. It's a balance, you know. I hear you. So I would say list them, pick, you know, 2 of these, go into pro and cons, and once you do that, spend more time, as you said, on the monetization model, because you know, this is a different model than the original one. So maybe we can put 3, right, and spend more time thinking about that. Why is this better than the other one, right?
Yeah.
Great, thank you guys. Great session today.
It was a lot of fun, Milena. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, bye bye.
It's a
Thanks, everybody.
fun question.
Thanks.